Of all the things I have ever knit, this is without a doubt the most reached for in my wardrobe. I feel incredible when I wear this sweater. I've literally prioritized my knitwear so much that I cut my hair over it. This guy is insanely cozy and warm. As I'm seeing it in the viewfinder, though, I'm actually thinking it would look so good with shoulder pads, but that's a topic for another day. My most worn knit garment I have ever made is
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for what is just a little bit different from my typical Saturday morning episode today. I do typically reserve Saturday mornings for a knitting podcast update. However, since I have been pretty monogamous over the past couple of weeks, it felt like today's podcast episode would have just been a little bit redundant. And so I decided to take the opportunity to film a video that I've been really wanting to get to for quite a few weeks now and just haven't found the time to get that second video out during the week. So this seemed appropriate, not to mention the fact that I think that the anecdotes and the takeaways from today could be really helpful in guiding not only myself in my sort of 2025 making journey, but maybe you. Perhaps these projects that I'm talking about today will give you a little bit more insight into the patterns, the designs, the choices that I've made from yarn to color to fiber. I think that perhaps by analyzing all of this myself on here, it could be very useful to help both of us in making better choices around making this year. So with that being said, what we are discussing today are my top 5, maybe a bonus 6 favorite knits of all time. And I'm using favorite as in my most worn knits of all time. If you're interested in seeing another video of maybe just my most proud or my actual favorite process and the knits that I really am biased to more than anything, let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. But today I really wanted to evaluate the knits that get the most wear and attention of all time in my wardrobe since I started knitting on January 1st of 2023. So I think that we should go ahead and dive on in. Now, I have no real data to back up the things that I'm going to say today. You'll just have to take my word for it that these are the garments that get the most wear in my hand knit wardrobe. And this is as someone who really does try to wear my knits so much as I can, so much so that I literally cut my hair to to feel more like myself in my knitwear, because prior to knitting, I really was not much of a knitwear person. I really did favor a lot more structured garments. And so for me, there was just an imbalance happening of having now a wardrobe full of more drapey and soft pieces and then having this long hair. Those two weren't really working for me. So I've literally prioritized my knitwear so much that I cut my hair over it. And I think it's also worth noting that I work as a bridal hairstylist, which means that a lot of times if I'm working, my knitwear has to be very practical and very much something that I can take on and off. I also live in Connecticut, which means that we have a very seasonal year. We have a lot of time in these chillier months during the fall, winter, even a bit of spring, but then come summer, a lot of the heavier sweaters really do go out the window. I also, up until today, have never depilled or done anything to kind of maintain my knitwear. So we're really going to see how well these items have worn, being my most worn object. Okay, with that out of the way, let us go ahead and start with what's going to be, I think, tied at 5 and 6. So yes, there's 6 pieces here. I don't know why 5 felt like a nice tidy number, but there truly are 6 pieces that I could say with confidence I wear the most. So let us start with my Beatrix cardigan by Gregoria Fibers. Here we have it. This is my Beatrix cardigan. Now, I finished knitting this garment in October of 2024, so it's definitely a recent make, a recent FO, which does typically mean that it kind of has that new and shiny feel to it. But I have to tell you that the amount that I have worn this has kind of just surpassed that new and shiny feeling. This is at the moment my most reached for cardigan. Now, I knit mine out of Lamb's Pride worsted in the colorway Chocolate Souffle, and I held that together with Knit Picks Alpaca Cloud lace in the colorway Hamlet. This cardigan has a round collar to it, and it has all over texture. It also doesn't entirely close in the middle. The two front edges kind of just meet up against each other, and they should, even more so than they do in my case, because of the way that I had made my button loops. My two front edges don't even really snug up to each other exactly, so I get a little bit of a gap in the middle. But I find myself reaching for this to pair with so many different things. It's been a very versatile piece in my wardrobe. On your average weekday, I have absolutely loved wearing this with a pair of blue jeans and flats or sneakers. I oftentimes wear it over top of this very similar color, just tank top underneath, because I like that you then kind of can't see where those parts don't meet up in the middle. But I've also worn it with a white collared shirt underneath, and I've worn it with a white tank top underneath. I've recently started wearing it with a new purchase I made for my wardrobe, which was a pair of leopard print jeans to really kind of spice it up. So this guy does find its way into many of my everyday, just easy peasy casual outfits. It also, though, is something that I have dressed up. One of my favorite outfits that I had worn last year was actually I had paired this over top of a tan and black and brown wrap style dress, which actually has a deep V-neck, and I was going to an event that kind of didn't call for such a deep V, so I was able to wear this cardigan over top and get the coverage that I really wanted. I paired that with some over-the-knee black heeled boots, and I think overall it just made for a really chic, classy, kind of vintage-inspired outfit, and I really loved it. Now, if I had to guess some other reasons why this is one of my most worn pieces, of course the color is going to be a big part of that. And if you've been here for the past year, you know that I kind of just discovered chocolate brown, and I just have really fallen in love with it as a better alternative for me than black, which is kind of funny that I'm wearing black and brown today. But I definitely do feel that as a dark neutral, the chocolate brown does tend to suit me better than a black does on most days. And I also, thinking about this a little bit more, decided that part of why I became obsessed with this color, I think, is because as someone who used to work in a salon where it was required to wear all black all the time, once I left that space, I actually had a very negative reaction to wearing black. It just always made me feel like I was going back to work. It would be as if you continue to wear your uniform even when you no longer worked at, McDonald's anymore, whatever it is. That was just kind of how I felt. I would avoid wearing black at all costs. And so my wardrobe really did stray away from having any of those deep contrasting neutrals in it. And once I discovered the chocolate brown thing, I just feel like I fell in love with it because I find it a little bit better for my skin tone, but also because I really was lacking anything of that depth and contrast in my wardrobe anyway. So I definitely think, of course, the color plays a really big role in how versatile it is in my wardrobe. I also, though, think that for me, I've discovered that textured knits for me really play a big role in making me feel like I've put on a special outfit, even when it's just a sweater and jeans. If this cardigan was in this color but was all stockinette, I promise you I would feel very differently about putting it on and leaving the house in it. The fact that this is so textured really, for me, makes it feel like a little bit more unique, a little bit more put together, and just something, it looks more luxe. And that's something that I really love to have represented in my wardrobe. Now, I also think that the weight of this piece in these colder months, of course, is going to make it something that I reach for. This guy is insanely cozy and warm. I definitely think that that Lamb's Pride worsted plus the Knit Picks Alpaca Cloud lace, that fabric gets you something that's very dense and still drapey, but it has a weight to it that's very comforting to wear. And then the other key component of this is the fact that the Lamb's Pride worsted yarn in this sweater, I had thrifted. So for me, the cost of this sweater, it's not something that I feel like I have to be too precious about. And therefore, I get to really wear this with a lot of confidence and in a way that I really don't have to overthink it. Obviously, if something ever happened to this, I would consider this one of those knits that if something happened to it, I would have to remake it because I love it so much. But even with all of the time and effort that put into the overall texture, the fact that the actual material cost was fairly low for this garment just makes it easier for me to wear it without being too concerned about something happening to it, which is good because for the most part, I don't know the last time I wore something and ruined it while out and about in my daily life. I'm a pretty careful person. I don't even know the last time I got, a pasta sauce stain on something. It's just not something that's happening for me regularly. And so I find it kind of comical that myself included, but I know a lot of us think, oh my gosh, what if I wear this piece out and a bucket of paint falls on top of me? Like, I don't know the last time that happened to you, but I think that having pieces like this in my wardrobe, it's just a good reminder that I don't have to be too precious about my knits. And this did cost me less in materials, so I can move forward with confidence, but it also tells me that I shouldn't be too precious about the other things I have, even if the cost was high. All the more reason to get the wear out of it that cost deserves. Now, each piece that you're seeing too, I've actually used the D-pillar on one side of the garment, and then on the other side, I did not use it. So I'll be sure to get you some close-up footage as I'm talking of the side that has been D-pilled, of the side that has not been D-pilled. Overall, I think that this texture and this fabric has held up overwhelmingly well to the amount of wear that it's been through. I don't think it has an atypical amount of pilling or signs of wear, and I would most definitely knit with this combination of yarns again. I think for each garment, I'd also like to just say one thing that I could maybe tweak about it to make it that much better and have it find even more wear in my wardrobe. And for me, that's the thing I've been saying since I finished it, which is the little button loop situation. I have grown to enjoy the substantial size of them, but I think that there is a world in which at some point I would probably swap out my button loops for something a little bit more dainty, a little bit less large. And so, yeah, that's number 6, the Beatrix cardigan by Gregoria Fibers. All right, next up here, coming in at the number 5 position, is my stripe pipe sweater by Veronica Lindbergh, Kutova Kika. Mine is knit out of the main color is Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool, which is 100% wool in the colorway oatmeal. And then the rust, the tan, the green, and the burgundy yarns that you see, those were a variety of nature spun yarns. And then the charcoal gray that you see in the center here is Cascade 220 Superwash in the colorway Jet. I finished this garment in May of 2024, so I've definitely had a lot of time to wear this. And I will say that in the late summer, in the midst of summer, on those cooler evenings throughout the fall, this sweater was being worn probably every other day, if not more than that. I've found that the fit of this sweater is overwhelmingly the reason why it gets as much wear as it does. I think that I've wound up somehow striking this perfect balance of enough ease, but not too much. The length on it, it's not totally cropped, but it's also not super long. So I feel comfortable wearing it both tucked in as well as untucked. And I just think in general, for a striped sweater, it's such a wardrobe classic, a wardrobe staple, that this really became a sort of sweatshirt for me throughout the warmer months. Now, as it's gotten colder, I haven't reached for it quite as much, but honestly, it's only because I find myself layering a little bit more with cardigans. And this is one of those things that I'd have to layer more underneath and not as much on top. So it just hasn't gotten that much wear over these cooler weeks that we've been having in Connecticut. But some of the things I really love about this are of course, the stripes. And I feel like I struck a good balance of having colored stripes in this with the green, with the rust, but it also kind of all plays together as very much a neutral. So it definitely goes with just about everything in my wardrobe. Now, this compared to the Beatrix cardigan is definitely not quite as versatile. I really have not been able to wear this for more formal occasions. In fact, I probably wouldn't even really wear this to go work in, whereas I've worn the Beatrix cardigan to go work in as a bridal hairstylist. This definitely reads a lot more sporty, casual. I've worn it to a baseball game. I've worn it to the park. I've worn it to Cake Palooza this year. It definitely, for me, works best in my wardrobe, just throwing this on with a pair of jeans and white sneakers. I've also worn it with a denim maxi skirt just to give it a little bit more flair, and for me, kind of add just a little bit more of a feminine quality, because the only thing I would maybe change about this, and I wouldn't change it about this exactly, but if I were to knit this again, which I know for sure I will, I don't know if it'll be this year or in just years to come, but knitting this was one of my best experiences knitting a simple garment I've ever had since I started knitting. I loved the making of this. So for the next one that I make, I think I will just go with something a little bit more girly, because this does for me tend to read very, I grabbed my boyfriend's sweater, and I love that when I love that. But then there are times where for me to feel the most like myself when reaching for the sweater, I feel like I have to add just a little bit of a more girly element just to really make it my own and make it feel like me. But otherwise, I absolutely adore this piece. This is a worsted weight garment, so it definitely has a thicker quality to it. However, I find this to be so lightweight and breezy to wear, which is why it really worked for me a lot in the warmer months as a sweatshirt, or just as a piece that I would keep in the car to kind of chuck on as things got a little bit chillier. The 100% wool that the majority of this garment is made out of, that line brand Fisherman's wool, has just been a dream to wear for me personally. I found that when I'm wearing this, I don't tend to get overwhelmingly hot, but it does keep me very warm in the end. And I just think overall, the little details of the twisted rib and the pops of color on the cuffs and the collar and everything, for me, make this feel, again, a little more luxe while still being very much a basic. As far as the stripe type kind of wear and tear, for the amount that I've worn it, I'm not particularly surprised by the amount of pilling, but I will say that it definitely needed that sweater was definitely one of the ones in my knit wardrobe that made me feel like we need to invest in a sweater shaver, because you were really starting to see those signs of wear in all of the typical areas, under the arms, all of that stuff. But it also was one of the quickest to just go around and nip those little pills off, and it looks good as new after one depilling after months and months of wear. And I have to say that if you've been interested in knitting this sweater and you haven't yet, please take this as your final push to just go ahead and cast it on, because I promise you, anyone that I've heard of knitting this, we've all just enjoyed the very mindless, simple process that it has been to knit. So for all of those reasons, when it comes to this garment in particular, if you were to ask me if I would change anything about it, the answer is no. This one is perfect as is. The next stripe type I knit, though, will definitely be a little bit lighter, a little more girly to suit my own style. So that's the stripe type by Veronica Lindbergh. To Kutovakika. Coming in here at number 4 is my Artemisia sweater by Emma Mare. This was actually a test knit that I had done towards the end of 2024, and I actually finished this in November of 2024. The yarn that I had used for this was not one that I had used before. It is Mohair by Canard Boucle, and that is a yarn that we got for 50% off as test knitters of the Artemisia sweater. And then I used a funny combination of yarns for the cuffs, the hem, the collar. The outside, the yarn that you see is Woolfolk tinned. And then on the inside, it is a different yarn that I can't think of the name right now, and I'll have to just pop it on the screen. But I love this sweater. This is one of those sneaky things that I thought, how often will I really wear a boucle sweater? And I gotta tell you, there was there was a time where I think I wore this sweater every single day for like 2 weeks straight. I just love the weight of this finished garment, and then the warmth factor. Everything combined just makes this an ideal knit. I didn't know, and I might scare some of you right now by saying that I wasn't sure if you could take a D-pillar to this boucle fabric, but I also had been noticing not that it has any pilling to it, but almost the mohair boucle, the fibers that are very long. I mean, if you look at this, there's a certain halo to it, and it's just that mohair boucle alone. There's no additional strand of a silk mohair adding that fuzz factor. But all of that kind of hair, that halo that was standing up, it was starting to really kind of matte. It was a gently matted situation that was happening. So I wasn't sure if I could take a D-pillar to it. I will say that I did. I don't think it really did anything to it other than maybe it kind of helped to unruffle some of those little gently matted sections. Now, again, this is one that, just like the rest of them, I did do the D-pilling on one side and didn't do it on the other. So I'm wondering if in the close-up footage, you'll be able to tell more of a difference between the two sides. But just so you know, I did take the D-pillar to it. I didn't notice much coming off in the chamber of the D-pillar. And so I don't know that it was so effective, but I was able to do it without damaging the sweater is the point I'm trying to make. Now, obviously we have another neutral sweater, although this is a beautiful, warm brown. This colorway was called Walnut. And for me, this sweater comes in at that less positive ease than a lot of my other sweaters I own. It's also not cropped, but not totally a longer sweater. It definitely airs more on the side of cropped than not. But I think for the past 3 now garments that I've been talking about, they've all kind of struck that good balance in length of being that in between enough that I feel comfortable wearing it both tucked in and not. But really for me, the star of the show here is obviously the boucle fabric. I think a common theme here really is going to be the fact that for me, a piece that has texture, it's more harmonious with the rest of my wardrobe because I tend to have a lot of basics. And so the textural elements really help to elevate my overall style while still wearing an otherwise simple piece. This is a basic raglan silhouette sweater. As I'm seeing it in the viewfinder, though, I'm actually thinking it would look so good with shoulder pads, but that's a topic for another day. As it is, it's a very crew neck sweatshirt vibes. I especially love the clean finishes of the hem, the collar, the cuffs. That all really, for me, makes this otherwise probably overwhelmingly formal sweater. It keeps it a little more sporty and a little more fresh and casual. And so similarly to the Beatrix cardigan, this garment has been able to play many roles in my wardrobe. Most notably, I wore this for Thanksgiving with my family this past year, and I actually wore it with a satin maxi skirt. A satin maxi skirt that matched the color perfectly. And I really felt like it was that perfect, just elevated, comfortable, chic, monochromatic look, but the textural differences really just made it look so luxe when in reality the skirt was, a $20 Amazon find and it's otherwise a very basic sweater. So I loved that, but I also have most definitely worn this one the most with just a pair of blue jeans. I have enjoyed a lot swapping out my footwear when wearing this piece. I've worn it with flats to keep, just a little bit more elevated. I've also worn it with sneakers and have loved that look. I've even gone as far as to throw on just a baseball hat and run out the door to run groceries. But I've definitely also worn this one with a little bit more jewelry and a little bit more of a dressy shoe choice. And it's worked out as a little bit more polished, casual, I think under a blazer. I just love the versatility. And especially because this fabric, being the boucle, it's extremely lightweight. I'm talking like this thing weighs nothing. And yet it's so warm and cozy. And it's literally like wearing a cloud. And I just love it for that so, so much. Now, when it comes to this garment, things that I would change to make it even better would be two things. Number one, I think my sleeves should have been about an inch, maybe an inch and a half longer. I do find myself when I'm wearing this one kind of tugging it over my hands. But that being said, I also am so 50-50 on the matter because I think that it tends to look way more polished the way that these sleeves can kind of hit a little bit more bracelet length. So I'm on the fence about changing that on this one. I feel like I won't for this sweater in particular, but the next time I knit my Artemisia sweater, I'll probably knit the sleeves a little bit longer. And then kind of in a similar category, I don't know why, I just feel like this hem at the bottom, which by the way is a folded over hem, so there's no ribbing here. It's all folded hems, which just adds to that really neat and tidy polished look. But I feel like it's about an inch as it is right now, and I think it should be more like an inch and a half to 2 inches, which is another thing that I'd like to experiment with on the next Artemisia sweater that I knit, which I already have the yarn for because that's how much I love this. So that is the Artemisia sweater by Emma Mare. At number 3, we have my yoga winter sweater by Naringa Rook. I finished this sweater in December of 2024, and I knew it was going to be a great basic, but it shocked me actually just how much I've worn it. I'm going to lower it just a little bit so that you can actually see it's a tall turtleneck, but I knit this one out of Barocco Ultra Wool in the colorway Bear. That's a super wash worsted weight yarn. There's a theme here. And no surprise, it's another neutral color. It's this deep chocolatey, definitely more purple leaning brown. In fact, in the sunlight, this color is almost definitely just purple, but it's very difficult to capture that on camera, so you'll just have to take my word for it. The main feature of this sweater in particular is the hem, which is this sort of upside down trapezoid shape. It's basically a split hem that kind of tapers down on the sides. And again, I knew I was making a brown raglan turtleneck sweater. I didn't think that was going to be anything groundbreaking, but I've got to tell you, it still shocked me the amount of times I have worn this sweater since I finished it. I believe, honestly, that this is the perfect basic turtleneck for my wardrobe. I think that if everything was the same, but the hem was just straight across, I would not wear it nearly as much as I do. And I think that's really just because I find the hem to be the part of this that makes it goes that extra mile of making it again special and particularly flattering. I just think that the way that the bottom kind of comes in and then the hips come out a little bit, I feel incredible when I wear this sweater. Now, it is another one that when I took the depeller to it, I gotta say, this yarn was not looking its best prior to being depelled. And even sitting here now, I can see the difference across the two sides of where I've depilled it and where I have not. This yarn most definitely tends to fuzz up on itself quite a bit, but I think this would probably be one of those situations in which once you've depilled it one time, after that, it's probably not as likely to need so much treatment. But being as it is, it definitely, you could see the wear and tear on this pretty rapidly. Now, I did not hold a mohair with this or anything like that. This is just a straight up super wash wool. And so it most definitely can play different roles in my wardrobe, from being so super casual to dressed up in all the same ways that I find my Beatrix and Artemisia to be. This sweater looks fantastic with that satin maxi skirt in the walnut color of the Artemisia sweater. The way that that high-waisted maxi skirt allows you to see the little peekaboo of the split hem and then still get coverage over kind of like tummy bits and pieces that I don't necessarily need to be out and about. I really love that about this. It's kind of the best of both worlds of a cropped and a long sweater. But equally, or maybe even more so, it looks just so darn good with a pair of jeans. Very similarly to the other brown sweaters in my wardrobe, I love wearing this with sneakers. I've worn it with boots. I've dressed this up. I've dressed this down. I've worn this for work as well as just to go poke around to the grocery store. It has played a lot of roles in a very short amount of time in my wardrobe. Now, I also know off the bat that there are two things about this sweater that I think I'm actually going to change. And so these are not just things that I would change if I were to knit it again. It's like we're probably going to go back and do this sooner than later. But the sleeves on this one need to be lengthened, I would say about the amount of the ribbing. So we're talking about 3 inches that I wish these sleeves were longer. It's another one that I find myself just tugging and tugging and tugging at these sleeves, trying to make them cozy and cover my hand, and they don't want to, and they always bounce back. But I think that the overall look of this sweater could benefit from a cozier sleeve, and especially the way that I've been wearing it, more casual than formal. But even formal, I just think that this would look better with sleeves that are too long versus the sleeves that are too short. I do think that with this one in particular, it actually does look like I'm wearing a sweater that doesn't fit me properly. So that's kind of where I take issue and draw the line. So definitely I need to add length to these sleeves. The other thing is with the turtleneck collar here. Now, it's a single layer turtleneck collar that was all knit from the top down. This is not a go back and pick up stitches situation. You start with the 2x2 ribbed collar. And I have two kind of issues with it. The first one is that I think I had knit it just about a 1/2 inch too tall, which is so hard to tell when you are knitting from the top down. I would say if you're going to knit this sweater, I would actually just start with the stockinette raglan of it all and then come back and just pick up stitches so that you have better control over how tall that turtleneck fit is. But because I had knit it a little bit too tall, the first time I wore it, I actually had tucked the collar in. And I think just because of the superwash and everything, ever since I had done that, all this thing wants to do is fold over at that point. But it's kind of allowed me to see, if I were to just fold this over, it's definitely too short at that point. However, I'm not opposed to just adding length to what's already there and then folding it over and sewing it down to create a double thick turtleneck collar, just because I do feel like the single layer in the superwash is a little bit floppy for my liking, and I think it could look better and just more substantial if it was a double thick fabric. I'm not decided on that, but it's something I would think about doing. And to be honest, if I were to do it, I would probably just pick up stitches at the point that it is right now and then knit down however far I want to, because that seam would always just be on the inside and no one would ever see the little jog between the two. So I really don't think that that would be the end of the world to do that, though I know some people would lose their minds if I were to do that. But anyway, I love this sweater. It gets a ton of wear, and that's why it's at the number 3 position. So that's the Yoga Winter Sweater by Naringaruk. In the number 2 spot here, we have my Korsavan Cardigan by Tanya Hodney. I finished this garment in January of 2024. So this is actually on its full year anniversary of having finished it, which means that the stats for this one are overwhelmingly probably the most accurate, but this garment has done just such heavy lifting in my wardrobe. I have knit the Korsavan cardigan twice, and in this version of it, I did make some modifications. So I had done a double knit button band versus the ribbed button band in the pattern. And then I also opted to do tapered sleeves instead of the balloon sleeves written in the pattern, which means that there was a little bit of math involved in that process. And I have to say that it all paid off because I have lived in this sweater. The running theme is still here, that the texture is definitely what makes this such a great staple in my wardrobe. But I guess I'm also noticing I really don't have a stockinette cardigan to compare these ones to. So I don't know how that would compare directly, but what I do know is that this basket weave texture just has a really, really different feel and vibe compared to the Beatrix cardigan. That Beatrix cardigan is so classic and traditional, where this basket weave, I think, just combined with the cleanness then of the double knit button band and then the monochromatic buttons. Overall, this garment has a very sort of Japandi vibe to it, in my opinion. I have found this to be just the ultimate last minute throw on piece. I think it looks amazing with all of my linens that I wear throughout the summer, be it the tan linen that I own, as well as the black linen pants, linen skirts. It really does pair so nicely with those, as well as jeans. I think probably the only way I haven't worn this is with a dress. I've worn it with skirts because I can kind of tuck in the bottom, but dresses, not so much. I think that it's not quite cropped enough to wear it with a dress. It tends to look a little bit more frumpy, but this one, like the stripe hype, is made out of Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool, which is 100% wool in the colorway oatmeal. And I've said this before, I'm not particularly sensitive, and I think that this fabric is really, for me, it's on the softer side. I know a lot of people would say, absolutely not would you ever put this on bare skin, but I have worn this even recently on a podcast just as a top with no additional layer underneath. And I think that's one of the best parts about a V-neck cardigan compared to a round neck cardigan. I think that it gives you just the most versatility to be able to wear this as a little bit more of a date night top with that V-neck. It's a little more sexy. It's a little bit more fun versus then wearing this. I wear it all of the time over higher necked t-shirts, or again, a linen top, a top like the one I have on right now. It looks really fantastic and just brings another element to an outfit. So for me, the V-neck cardigan kind of gets my vote and seal of approval in that department. But I also think that this is a true testament to the finishing touches of a garment. That double knit button band, I think, makes a massive difference in this all over texture versus the ribbed button band that's written into the pattern. I think that the double knit is a really nice contrast to all of the texture. I also think that the buttons that I've chosen for this garment, while they were most definitely the most splurgy accessory additional notion that I've ever purchased, and even without meaning to, they are the perfect button for this garment. And you know what? Sometimes that additional element can be the thing that makes or breaks a garment. And that is why I die on the button hill, that it's gotta add to the garment. At the very least, it shouldn't take away. And I really do think that that is what these buttons do. They blend in so seamlessly, but they also bring a really rich element. I've gotten compliments on this sweater before, and it usually comes in the form of like, where do you buy something like that? Because it looks that luxe in person. Now, very much like the stripe hype, you could definitely see the signs of wear and tear on this garment. But I think that because of the all over texture, it really wasn't quite as obvious as it was on my stripe hype. And I have undoubtedly worn this way more than I've worn my stripe hype just because of how long it's been off the needles. So I think that based on how much I've worn it, the wear and tear was not quite as obvious. And yeah, it did really benefit from a de-pilling. When it comes to things that I would change about this garment, I would do absolutely nothing to this except for use it as a little bit of a lesson. The only thing that keeps me from wearing this garment more is the color. And I think that there's just something about the level of contrast of this particular grayish with my skin tone. It's not the most flattering color for me. And really, that's the only thing that keeps me from wearing it more often. Now, that being said, I love this combo of the buttons and the texture and the color as a whole too much, I think, to dye it. I just think that it would inform me in the future when it comes to making a V-neck cardigan. It has to be something with more contrast. And I think that I could use a lighter brown kind of, the color of the year almost, that mousse color, chocolate mousse is it? I feel like I could use a V-neck cardigan in that color. And I think if I had that, this probably would start to make its way a little back further in the back of my wardrobe, but it doesn't change the fact that this is one of my favorite things I've ever made. And as far as fit and style go, I would not change a thing. I absolutely adore this item. So that is the Corsavin cardigan by Tanya Hodney. Now, before I pop my most worn garments onto Helena the Hanger here, I just want to give you an opportunity to guess what you think it might be, because I'll be honest, it shocked me. However, of all the things I have ever knit, this is without a doubt the most reached for in my wardrobe. And I definitely think that I need more garments just like this one. So take a second and think. I really do feel like this is going to surprise some people. Here we have it. My most worn knit garment I have ever made is my Sailor Swift top, also by Veronica Lindbergh Kotova Kika, the same designer as the Stripe Hype sweater. I knit mine out of Knitting for Olive merino, which was left over from another project for which the yarn was gifted. And the colorways are brown nougat and cream. I finished this garment in June of 2024, and I actually felt like it was probably one of the most useless things that I had made. While I got wear out of it during the final months of summer after I finished it, the merino tank top thing, I did wear it on warmer days, and I really didn't have a bad reaction to wearing the wool on those summer days. But where this piece really started to shine was once the temperatures started dropping around here. And I'm pretty sure I have worn this underneath every single one of the garments I have talked about already. Not only do I find that this yarn next to skin is just soft and cozy, and if you know me, you know that I'm not the knitting for olive girl. I only got to work with this yarn because it was gifted for another project. And in that project, I was holding it with the soft silk mohair. I never would have gone out of my way to buy knitting for olive merino until owning this garment. It's so soft next to skin, which is excellent because that's typically how I'm wearing this, is as my first layer. And I just think that the yarn combined with this tank top, it's just a match made in heaven. Now, I think I knew that this was something that was not just a fluke thing when I'd be getting dressed in the morning to go run errands or go visit my parents or something. And I would be reaching for one of my cozy sweaters, and I'm like, you know what? If I wear another layer underneath, I won't really have to wear my coats because I hate wearing coats. I find them so restrictive. So I started putting this on underneath some of those other pieces. But then what would happen would be I'd get home, and the first thing I do when I get home is like change out of my jeans. I get into my comfy sweatpants, and I will take off my sweaters when I get home, but I was leaving this thing on. And then I'd fall asleep in it. And then it'd be the next day, and I didn't really want to take it off. And I think I'm just obsessed with this wool layer. Now, I also know when I had made this, I was talking about how if you're someone who has those couple of fingering weight skeins of merino in your stash and you're trying to just find a way to use them, you don't want to put them into an accessory, I think that the tank top is the way to go because it does not use a lot of yarn. I'll make sure it's on the screen here just how much yarn this project used in particular. But even if you were to go out and buy this yarn at full price to make this project, you are not spending an obscene amount of money. And I really think that this project in particular has converted me. I want to knit up something else in the knitting for olive yarn because of a couple of things. Obviously, the softness factor. I mean, it's a little unreal. I literally forget that I have this on when I'm wearing it. But also, I've worn this under so many things. So you would think with all of that friction that it would wind up pilling and being pretty severely worn looking. But even after hitting it with the deep pillar just to kind of see the difference, I think that this thing looks brand new. I almost can't tell which side I've done the deep pilling on and which side I haven't. So for me, this yarn combination, the fit of this garment in particular, the high neck, the high back, the negative ease, it just makes for the perfect ultimate layering piece. And I literally want to make one in every color. The only thing that's held me back from wearing this more than I have, which is a lot, is literally the stripes, because I'll only wear this really if you're not going to see it underneath what I'm wearing, unless I deliberately want you to see the stripes. So by that, I mean, I wish that I had it in white. I wish I had it in black. I wish I had it in gray and red and solid brown so that I could kind of wear it more like a t-shirt where it does kind of just poke out the top of a sweater and the stripe doesn't catch your eye and distract you. But literally, other than that, this thing is perfect. And even as it is, I wore this underneath the stripe hype to Cakepalooza. I did not plan to take my sweater off. I thought it was going to be colder than it was. So that was an instance where I literally wore this because I thought it would keep me warm without having to wear a coat. But when it ultimately got too warm for this sweater, I took that off and I was wearing this and I still felt really put together and polished because who wears a knit tank top? Like, it just looks really luxe and special and nice. And obviously at this point, those are some of the qualities that are very important to me, apparently, in my wardrobe. Now, I do have one small gripe that I would potentially consider fixing on this. I'm probably not going to, but again, when I knit the multitude of other colors that I want to in this, the one thing I'm going to take into consideration is the fact that I want it to be like 3 inches longer, because I exclusively wear this guy tucked into my jeans, and I just find sometimes it rides up a little bit. So I think it's one of those things, if it was just longer, I would have an easier time layering it, wearing it. But otherwise, I love this silly thing so much. It completely caught me by surprise how much I wear it, and the way in which I would say we all need 10 of them in our wardrobe because it's just that good. I think too, down to the finishes of this, obviously I think the ones that I make in the future, I probably wouldn't knit it with the stripes, which would just make it that much more mindless. But otherwise, the little detailed finishes of the I-cord and just, I don't know, all of that, it really makes it look from afar a lot less sweatery and a lot more just tank toppy. And for me, it's just such a win. And especially in this Knitting for Olive yarn. So that is my number one spot, the Sailor Swift tank top by Sailor Swift top by Veronica Lindbergh Kutova Kika. So there we have it. Those are my most worn top 6 knit pieces of all time, and just a quick little overview of things that I noticed by pulling together these things for this video is, number one, those were all garments that I happened to finish in 2024, which means that the garments I finished in 2023 are not really being worn as much as I thought that they would. I'm not surprised by this because while I have some pieces from 2023 that I love, it also was my first year of knitting. And I think that there are some choices I made that ultimately lend themselves to not being the most not being my most favorite things to wear. On that note, if you want to see a video similar to this one, but of my least worn pieces or kind of my biggest fails, I'd be really happy to put that together because I think that there's some things that we can learn from those choices. Again, it's kind of like yarn and pattern combinations and fit issues and all of those things. I just think that that's a really big learning opportunity. So if that's something you'd be interested in, please let me know down below. I'd be happy to get into that. But also, looking at these pieces, the common theme here is that neutrals were the winning pieces for this year and for what are my most worn knits right now. Now I'm using all of this information, all of this little collection of data to inform what I'm interested in making in 2025. And I thought I'd be able to put this all into one video, but I just have so much to say about both of these topics. So I think that that's just another video we're gonna have to make and be on the lookout for. But I definitely think it's worth it to take the time to just sit and even make a list for yourself of what are your most worn and least worn garments that you've knit. And I bet that you'll see a common theme across your most and least worn knits that really could be so valuable to figuring out how you should continue to make, whether that be you feel you have a surplus now of these amazing things you love to make and therefore it's time to start making things that are very different from that, or if you're feeling like you have these pieces that you're loving so much and you really need more of them in your wardrobe. I think if you take a critical look at what you've made and what you wear, you'll see those themes and it could just help you figure out what you want to knit next. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video today. If you did, I would so appreciate it if you would go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you subscribe and ring the bell, you'll be notified anytime I post a new video. However, you can always count on there being a new video just like this one every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. And with that, a big ol' thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.